A couple years ago, I attended a retreat in the south of France, and honestly, it was a disaster. The itinerary was a mess. The facilitator showed up very unprepared. And at one point, I remember just thinking, I paid for this? What was I thinking? I remember thinking, you know what? France is not the problem. The retreat is the problem. I knew that there was more for me here. I couldn't explain it, but I felt such a strong pull towards France. I knew that I needed to come back on my own terms. If you've ever felt a pull like that towards a place or a decision, a life change that maybe makes no logical sense, but intuitively feels right, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Today, I'm sharing what happened when I went back and how France gave me everything I wanted by taking away the one thing I thought I needed the most. Welcome to Lately with Lexi, where I help wellness brands grow and spiritual seekers evolve. Every episode explores spiritual wisdom, business building, or personal life reflections from my life. Come hang out as I share what I'm creating, learning, and navigating as a yogi, business consultant, healer, and entrepreneur. Here's something I didn't mention yet. The retreat in the south of France, that was not my first time in France. I was 12 years old the first time I went to Paris, and I fell completely in love with the city. There's something interesting that happens to certain people when they step into a place for the first time and feel something familiar. It's like you've already been there. That was me at 12, walking through Paris thinking, I don't know how, but I need to come back. I know that I'm meant to be here. So, when the retreat fell apart, something in me already knew what to do. I left the retreat early, along with a couple other participants who were equally just done with the whole experience, and we went straight to Paris. My boyfriend met up with us, and the moment he got there, the trip shifted. It stopped being about what I was leaving behind, and it started to be about what we were walking toward. On our final day in Paris, we were walking through the beautiful 16th arrondissement, and I'll never forget this. We were in the park behind the Eiffel Tower. There were kids running around and playing, beautiful dogs who were playing fetch, and the next thing I knew, my boyfriend and I both looked at each other and said, what if we actually moved here? We had no idea how we were going to make it work. We just knew that we were going to. After that failed retreat and the trip to Paris, we had about 6 months to figure it out. Unfortunately, right before we left, I lost my biggest consulting client. Practically overnight, I went from earning more than I ever had to earning less than half in the last 5 years. The timing felt brutal, and the voice in my head that had always tied my worth to my income got very loud very fast. I started to ask myself, who am I if I'm not making a lot of money? Who am I without the accolades of my biggest client? What does it mean about me that I have to lean on my boyfriend to support us? I think a lot of us build our identity on being the person who earns, who contributes, who doesn't need help. I know that's what I did. When that got pulled out from underneath me right before moving to Paris, I didn't just feel financially insecure. I felt like I honestly did not know who I was. If you've ever lost the thing you relied on to feel valuable, a job, a role, a title, a relationship, you know how disorienting that can be. A couple nights before our flight to Paris, I was a nervous wreck, to put it lightly. I started questioning why the hell I was moving to Europe when there were so many question marks about my career. I confided in my boyfriend and told him how terrified I was of the financial uncertainty. He reminded me we cannot put money on a pedestal because if we do, it will rule over our lives. And that story, the one where money determines your worth, is a form of imprisonment I knew that I did not want to participate in. Now, there's a phrase I come back to all the time that helps shift out of narratives that don't serve us, and it's that story follows state. The stories you tell yourself about who you are, about what your life means, about whether you're enough, all of those stories are really just trying to protect you and keep you safe. When your body is in survival mode, your mind generates these survival stories like, I'm not enough, I'm falling behind, I need to earn more, I've got to work harder. Those were the stories that were running through my mind before the big move. And here's what I've learned about that experience. When we're in that kind of transition, when an old identity is falling away and the new one hasn't arrived yet, what our nervous system needs more than anything is a sense of safety in the body. Not answers, There's not certainty, not a new plan, just to feel safe. If you're familiar with the chakra system, you know that this is the sole purpose of our root chakra, the energy center at the base of the spine that gives us a sense of safety and belonging. When it's balanced, we feel stable enough to handle and navigate change. When the root chakra is depleted, which it almost always is during major life transitions, our other energy centers can get thrown off too. Our creativity may dim, our intuition gets harder to hear, our heart feels closed, our voice gets quieter. So we've got to handle that. In order to balance your root chakra, you've got to ground your energy. For me, when I needed grounding, I always start with something simple. A practice as simple as pausing before my first sip of water each morning when I can connect to my breath, drop my awareness from my mind and into my low belly, allowing my exhales to be a little bit longer than my inhales. Now, that small shift can help get you out of your head and drop you deeper into your body. What this does is help signal to your nervous system that you're safe, even when external circumstances haven't changed yet. Because this breath awareness technique is so simple, you can do it a few times throughout the day to help relieve any stress, worry, anxiety, and you'll start to learn how to resource yourself into a state of safety when you're feeling uneasy. If you're navigating a big transition in your life right now, you need to know that shedding an old identity, it can be really uncomfortable and also humbling. So give yourself grace. That is what I had to do when we decided to move to Paris. When we finally landed in Charles de Gaulle at the Paris airport, we settled into an Airbnb in the 10th arrondissement, a neighborhood full of locals, not a tourist in sight. We had this perfect, quaint apartment. It was actually tucked away off of a side street, about a 10-minute walk from the famous Canal Street, and that became our home base. And here's the thing that I didn't expect about living in Paris. Nobody ever asked me what I did for work. Very different from meeting new people in the US. It's actually rarely even a point of conversation when meeting Parisians. And when you've spent most of your adult life believing that your worth is tied to your career, that kind of freedom can catch you off guard. For the first time in years, I wasn't focused on my business. I wasn't striving for growth. I was just being. We spent Christmas in Paris, and if you've never experienced it, there's nothing like it. It is more beautiful than you could ever imagine. The lights, the markets, all of the Christmas spirit. 2-hour morning walks through the city became my norm, of course, with a croissant in hand. And whether we cooked at home or we ate out, we would enjoy long, slow dinners with the freshest ingredients every single night. I remember feeling so present whenever we were eating, wandering through a museum, or exploring a part of Paris that we had never been before. Every slow morning, every meal that would last hours, every walk with nowhere to be, it was all quietly proving something to me that I hadn't been able to see before. Paris didn't care about the identity I'd tied to my work, and slowly I started to wonder if I needed to either. From Paris, we made our way to northern Italy to visit Damanhur, which is a spiritual community built over decades as an experiment in conscious living. Art, spirituality, and architecture are all beautifully woven together in a way that almost dissolves these boundaries between the sacred and everyday life. I could probably do multiple episodes just on Damanhur, but here's what I'll say about it now. Being surrounded by people who devote their lives to building something both meaningful and beautiful really woke me up to something I'd stopped paying attention to. Rick Rubin writes about this in The Creative Act. He says the real work of the artist, it isn't the thing you produce. It's a way of being in the world. At Damanhur, I saw people who didn't just make art. They made their homes, their routines, their community, their whole life into art. Also, it wasn't performative. It was just how they lived. And just like Damanhurians, your life can be a creative act too, not just your work, but your whole life. And if you've been waiting for permission to create in a way that has nothing to do with your job or what anybody else might think, consider this your permission slip. After returning to Paris, my boyfriend and I felt a strong pull to the south of France, so we booked a trip to Nice. I remember on the train ride south, I felt the energy shift almost immediately. The further we got from Paris, the calmer I felt. I loved the spaciousness along the coast and being surrounded by so much nature. Something in my body started to settle in a way that it hadn't yet on that whole trip. By the time we arrived in Nice, it was late, dusk was setting in. I remember it was probably at least 10 degrees warmer than Paris, and it felt heavenly. We stayed in the most gorgeous hotel that was newly renovated with a view of the sea. And that next morning, we got up early just to go on a hike that was around the corner from our hotel. And right away on that hike, we both knew the south of France had stolen our hearts. Part of me was surprised. I had been so certain about Paris, so settled in the vision of living there. And then Nice kind of changed everything. Not the dream itself, but the shape of it. And that's something I want to name because I think it matters. Anytime you think you want something and then the desire shifts, it doesn't mean that you're flaky or that you don't know what you want. A lot of times the things we desire, it's not actually about that specific thing. It's the feeling that we believe it will bring us. So what I realized in Nice was that my dream didn't change. My vision just got clearer. So here's 4 quick things I want you to walk away with from this episode. First, trust the pull. Even when it doesn't make logical sense, your intuition is not confused. It's just ahead of your timeline. If you ever feel a pull that you've been rationalizing away, just pay attention to those things and trust those intuitive nudges. Second, you are not your income. If you've been tying your worth to what you earn, what you produce, or how much you contribute, that is not your identity. That is a story your nervous system is telling you to keep you safe. And you can let it go the more you learn to self-regulate and establish internal safety through grounding your energy. Third, your life is a creative act. Creativity is not something you produce, it's something you are. When we stop rushing, we can actually hear the intuitive nudges that are trying to guide us towards what it is we're meant to create, not just in our careers, but in how we live. And fourth, let your dreams evolve. If something you thought you wanted starts to shift, it just means that your vision is getting clearer. Trust that. The version of the dream you've been holding might just be the doorway, not necessarily the destination. You don't have to abandon it. You just have to stay open to what it's pointing you towards. Remember, your vision doesn't change. It just gets clearer every time you take a step towards it. That is all I have for you guys today. Thank you for listening to Lately with Lexi. If this episode resonated, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment or write a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Make sure to subscribe on Substack to stay up to date on my writings and be the first to know about upcoming workshops and retreats. My next workshop will be in Sarasota, Florida for spring equinox on March 22nd. Send me an email if you want more details to sign up. And lastly, all of the links to work with me are in the show notes below in case you want to book a reading, a healing, or a consult. And I will see you next week.